Greetings. Last month, I put out a video titled Abba Bibbins' Identity, a reply to Ahlazar Ban Lawya of Sakari. In this video, I'd like to offer a short addendum to that video, covering something that I missed and wish I could have included. The video itself was a response to an earlier video from the previous month by Ahlazar Ban Lawya, as was implied by the title, and his video was titled Responding to Vocab about Abba Bibbins. I'll share a link to both videos in the video description. I feel that the video that I made was generally adequate. However, one place that could have had more, which I'll add to at this time, was pertaining to the beard of Abba Bibbins. You see, one of the things that was discussed in Ahlazar's video and my response to him was about how the picture of what's purported to be a later picture of Abba Bibbins has him with a totally white beard, and Ahlazar felt that it was somewhat implausible that his beard would go from jet black in the early 50s to, totally white by the end of his life, with the span of time being relatively short. In my response, I attempted to give reasons to think that it wasn't implausible for his beard to go white within that span of time, but there was certainly something that I hadn't considered, something that I had missed, and I just realized it this evening, hence why I wanted to make this short addendum video. But to begin, let me just replay the portion of Ahlazar's video which discussed the beard. Here we go.
So Arya had to be 12 at this time, right? That's when you get your bar mitzvah, at 12. 12 or 13, right? So one of the two. Arya is not all that old at the death of Abba Bibbins, right? So for him, mind you, as we can see here, this dude is total hoary head, right? Gray top and gray beard, right? This guy at the baptism of Arya, not the baptism, again, the bar mitzvah of Arya, which is not drastically long before his death. Here we see him, full black beard, black hair, no salt and pepper, right?
Okay, so fast forward to this evening, I was rewatching Uzziel Lewi's interview with a gentleman who's known as Chief of Chiefs Naphtali, who had met Abba Bibbins in the late 60s. And I'd seen the interview before, but when I made my response to Ahlazar, I had totally forgotten it. It totally slipped my mind that this gentleman had actually recounted that Bibbins, in fact, had a white beard in the 60s. So rediscovering that this evening made me want to make this quick addendum just to put this out here for the historical record. So I'd like to play a couple of quick clips. Here we go.
And Abba Bibbins, he told me personally, when I saw him, he said he was 80 years old. His beard was white. He was a very impressive man. And he told me, he said, I was out here talking this talk during the First World War. He said, and because I knew our people should know who the true and living God is. This time is 1968. And, and then when Abba Bibbins get up with that impressive voice and that stately manner and that white beard.
And he also used to wear a turban.
And he wore a white turban, And when he starts speaking, our people were, and always were in those days, intent on bowing to the gray hair. It was like, that's it. They said, we're now going to hear from our elder.
Okay, now, as was alluded to before playing those clips, the most significant part of that is, at least relevant to this video, is the fact that he serves as a witness to the fact that Abba Bibbins had, in fact, a white beard towards the end of his life. Now, there are other parts of that are somewhat curious. Like, for example, he says that in roughly 1968, Bibbins was 80 years old. So, Bibbins would have actually been in his early to mid 70s. Now, maybe he misremembers Bibbins' actual age, or maybe Bibbins actually told him that. It was rounding up. Interesting, in Uzziel Lewi's interview with Nasi Barak, I believe he also claims that Bibbins was in his 80s, towards the end of his life, which presumably would be a mistake. But whatever the case, the significant part is what he said about the beard. And, it's one thing to misremember a date. I don't think, he would misremember whether he had a white beard or not. And so, therefore, I think that's a helpful addition to the historical record on these discussions regarding the identity of Abba Bibbins. Before I close, I want to touch on one other thing that Chief of Chiefs Naphtali said. And by the way, I should refer to him as the late Chief of Chiefs Naphtali, the late Naphtali, because the gentleman apparently passed away early last fall. And but one other thing that he said that was interesting is he mentioned that Bibbins had told him that he was preaching out there or preaching out somewhere during the First World War. I find that significant because a number of One West splinter groups, most of them, when they offered their interpretation of Revelation 9:11, they hold that Abaddon or Apollyon, the angel that's over the bottomless pit, refers to Wilhelm II, who was the last Kaiser. And I think a lot of people would find that breakdown curious. Of course, the defenders of that interpretation would say they have a good case for it. I'm not here to judge that at this time, but I admit that I have long found that breakdown, that interpretation, somewhat curious, and I've wondered if it went back to Bibbins. See, Wilhelm II was someone significant to the First World War. And noting the age of Bibbins, I had long speculated that, he probably developed that interpretation or adopted it from others around the time of the First World War. It's easy to imagine someone looking at the Bible during the time of the First World War and then trying to, interpret the book of Revelations, or at least the 9th chapter, in light of what was going on at that time. It's harder for me to believe that someone living in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s, or in the case of the, more recent One Westers, in the 90s, coming to that conclusion on their own. So therefore, I long suspected that, it might go back to Bibbins. And so for that reason, it's interesting to see someone say that Bibbins was out there or out somewhere, not necessarily Harlem, but that he was out there teaching even during the First World War. I think it adds a little bit more to that bit of speculation on my part that he may have introduced that interpretation of Revelation 9:11 into what we now call the One West stream. So on that note, I'm going to close by playing a couple of different clips of One Westers stating exactly that Revelation 9:11 refers to Wilhelm II, Wilhelm Kaiser. And, I hope others found this interesting. As always, I look forward to the comments of others. And on that note, God bless. Okay, so here are the two clips.
I'm going to read it. It says, Revelation 9:11. Wilhelm Kaiser. He was a German emperor and king of Prussia. He deceived the Germans by making them think they could win the war. Read that verse again, brother.
Verse 11. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit.
Right, when you look up the word angel, it simply means messenger.
Good. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon.
Right, which means great deceiver. Because as we read, he did what? He deceived the Germans by making them think they could win the war. Read on.
But in the Greek tongue,
has
his name Apollyon.
Has his name what?
Apollyon.
His name is Apollyon, which means great deceiver. It means the same thing.
And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit.
The king is Wilhelm Kaiser the first. Wilhelm Kaiser the first. Okay, and it said, and they had a king over them, and the them is the Europeans over there in Europe, which is the angel of the bottomless pit. It's letting you know where the area is at. Right. It's in Europe, the bottomless pit, and we explained why it's called the bottomless pit, because when you read the second verse, it said there was smoke, referring to the war that was being fought in Europe. And also too, there's no good agricultural land, and there's no raw minerals over there in Europe. All you have is the mountains of regions called the Caucasus Mountains, which is located between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. So
Revelation chapter 9, verse 11. They had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit.
So there was a king, which was the messenger of Europe. Go ahead.
Whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon.
Give me the Wikipedia. I sent it to you. Willem Kaiser. Kaiser Soser. That's what I call him. Willem Kaiser II. He was the king over Prussia. But this is the guy that began World War I. Do they got his picture in there when you go down? Wait, that's him right there. That's him. This guy was the one that initiated World War I. Let's go to the top. Read that, Gedaliah.
Yes, sir. Wilhelm II, or William II, was the last German emperor and king of Prussia.
See that? King of Prussia. So he was the king over Prussia. That's what it says there was a king over the bottomless pit. That's this guy. Go ahead.
He reigned from June 15, 1888 until his abdication on November 9th, 1918, shortly before Germany's defeat in World War I.
Right. So that's all I want. Y'all can read the rest about him on your own, because I really don't give a damn a hoot about him. Let's go back.